I've often said, a garden is never perfect and it's never done. Last month I celebrated the 7th anniversary of this garden and late bloomer. Last night I was reading that the number 7 has particular significance in the Bible, and it's used over 700 times, often referring to wholeness or completeness or perfection. Recently I was asked to create a before and after video of my garden. Now, I don't consider it to be perfect or complete, but here's a look back at the transformation from then until now. In 2007, we had a major green partial renovation done on our house. The entire back deck, kitchen, and den was gutted. While most of the work went on in the back of the house, the front yard became a staging area for the construction. This green project was filmed for an episode of Greenovate, a new show which appeared on the Discovery Channel for one season in 2008 before the housing market crash. This is when my shutters were painted red and have stayed the same color since. We had landscaping done when the house was finished. During the next 4 years, all of the trees in the front yard, except the pine tree, died or were removed. Only a handful of pre-existing plants remain in the garden, such as the fuchsia camellias and shade-loving plants next to the house, as well as the signature pine tree. The big acacia tree got choked of water by the ground cover planted here and developed oak root fungus and died in late 2011, starting me on this path of discovery. When I first started planting my garden, the idea for a web show hadn't occurred to me. I have only a handful of photos from October through January of 2012 of the origin of my garden, all of which I used in my humorous and enlightening premiere episode of Late Bloomer. Even though both my parents grew up on a farm, I didn't come to gardening till last fall. I'm Kaye, and I'm a late bloomer. I was a serious photographer, and I even took my own photo for my late bloomer branding. But it wasn't until I bought my iPhone 4 with the first selfie side that it occurred to me I could film myself talking to an audience in the garden. What a lovely bouquet! As cauliflower was growing in Parkway Plot Number 1, the ficus tree root, still living after being cut down years earlier, was coming out of Parkway Plot Number 2. By the end of January, the local paper was photographing me with my first homegrown cauliflower. The resolution was so poor on those first clips, all these leaves can go in my compost, which I made on February 1st, that by March 20th, I had jumped to the lightweight Sony Nex 7. I said, how about I put a tomato plant right here and take advantage of this spot of sun? Unfortunately, this camera did not have a flip screen, which made filming myself more work. Seriously time to get another carrot. But it was fast focusing and very sharp filming critters, which I find fascinating. I had a ton of snails that first year, and I routinely went out at night to round them up. My first plantings were a Meyer lemon and Valencia orange trees, which I surrounded with nasturtium and herbs. I've had nasturtium blooming in spring in my garden ever since. After removing the grass and adding a raised bed, I used the surrounding area to grow a number of vegetables in the first years. The most challenging aspect was the heavy clay soil, so I spent countless hours sifting out rocks and adding amendments. I had not fully committed to planting only edibles in the front yard at this point, and experimented with first a border of camellias, then a row of rosemary.
We're getting a little rain here in Southern California. garden is enjoying a nice drink.
I was unstoppable and worked year-round, from morning till night most days. This is when I had a post-production team putting my videos together, and I spent much more time in the garden. There was one large mature plum tree here and one mature pineapple guava. 2 olive trees were planted that first year. I was a late bloomer gardener and didn't know anything about growing vegetables. I learned on the job, by trial and error. You should grow what you like to eat. So I focused on corn, tomatoes, and watermelon that first year, as well as zucchini, beans, strawberries, and much more. I always enjoyed sharing what I was learning and my produce with my neighbors. I love it when my neighbors drop by to enjoy my garden. Walker would help when he was home from Stanford. How many monarch butterflies are there left?
That's a good question. Millions, but they are one of the top 10 species to watch.
A chance encounter with a monarch enthusiast in Santa Monica led to one of my first episodes on the road, and she opened my eyes about the peril of our country's signature butterfly. I was hooked. By November of the first year, the garden looked pretty empty again. Then I became fascinated with fungi. I tried a lot of things that first year, like amaranth for grain and buckwheat for cover crop. And I had a lot of fun photographing critters and grew my first heirloom tomatoes. I photographed everything, especially bugs. This Queen of the Night cactus was just about to open. I had my first experience growing celery and harvested my first pineapple guavas and watched my first monarch caterpillars transform and held my first butterfly after birth. In fact, I became obsessed with monarchs. Ever wonder how they get out of that skin? I did until I saw this. After a year of going gung-ho on creating a front yard food garden, nothing was stopping me. I removed the old fence around the front porch so you could look out and see the garden. After more than a year of trying to keep neighbor dogs off my garden, in April of 2013, we undertook a major project to build a redwood fence of my design around the main part of the front yard. This required me to practically clean off the growing area. I wanted it tall enough to discourage dogs, but low enough so anyone passing by could see all the amazing vegetables. By growing food, not lawns, you make your front yard productive. You contribute to the soil bed, you capture the rainwater. It's a win-win situation, and it's so much fun watching things grow. After all, I got into this to inspire people to grow their own food. And what better way than to showcase my garden right by the sidewalk? As soon as one thing came out, something else would go in. That's been my modus operandi from the beginning. You have to when you have a small garden and you want to plant a lot of vegetables. By the end of February, I had a garden full of cool season vegetables. And a large portion prepped for seedlings I had started from seeds. This would be my first big year planting heirloom tomatoes and a wide variety of peppers. I knocked it out of the park my first time growing garlic. I've hardly mentioned beans. Meanwhile, I had so much kale in the parkway, I had to give it away. I was photographed again for the local paper. And my Savoy cabbage was prizeworthy. As the brassicas came out, Renee planted 3 pineapple guavas in the 6.5 by 20-foot bed. They had been languishing in pots, and I wanted to create more of a feeling of a continuous garden to the street. This began the Parkway No. 1 conversion to perennials. Parkway No. 2 is 14 feet long and anchored by a princess flower bush, which had been the pride of the neighborhood. I grew so many tomato plants, I had to give them away to a garden club. By July 5th, I thought I couldn't fit one more plant into a sunny spot. Then I bought okra, which replaced the corn in the back 40. Then I saw the damage on my first olives and learned it was from the olive fruit fly maggot. As I often say, something is always eating on something in a garden. The main front yard garden went through another transformation when I realized in 2014 I could be at least growing more produce in the summertime and installed a 5 by 10 foot raised bed, which I nicknamed the back 40. I've grown all annuals in this bed, with obviously more success in summer when the sun is higher in the sky. It's August the 1st. And powdery mildew has taken claim of the back 40. By the time I filmed my 5-part Growing Heirlooms Tomato series, I experienced my first real jungle. Okay, this is ridiculous. There used to be a walkway through here. The front yard was full of corn and huge tomato plants, and you could barely walk through. I found I enjoyed growing a wide variety of peppers as much as I did tomatoes. And pots lined the driveway. The parkway was full of everything from milkweed and pumpkins to quinoa, broom corn, and tomatoes. And Mexican sunflower attracted monarchs. For the first time, I had an abundance of tomatoes and corn. By September, I had the biggest one-day harvest before or since. I canned for the first time and made tomato jam. I found my little front yard garden could produce a lot. And then the peppers started coming in. Every season brought new methods and plantings. In 2015, I went all in and grew my first habaneros and borage. I haven't been without that since. And wonderful snap peas. I'd try new things like Jerusalem artichoke and orange Thai chilies. There were pests like hornworm. This one I named Freddie and made a video about him. When it's a baby, it has this long, it's like a narwhal whale. It has this long point on one end. I always thought that's the horn. That thing kind of drops off and becomes a little crooked tail. So the whole time I was seeing these small ones, I was thinking the tail was the head. In November, I created a trapezoid bed because I found that things just grew better in raised beds. Why do I love red voile over garden cloth? In 2016, from worm towers,
Now I just have to wait for it to rain.
to rain barrel installations, to wood chips,
Oh my gosh.
to the big driveway project. It was all about stepping it up. Is
Soil.
a nematode.
Oh, it's a whole group of.
I can't see it, right? It's too small.
Well, some are big.
Oh,
Yeah, so like humans can be infested. You'll cut this part out. Infested with some nematodes, big old things like this that live inside your body.
and further committing to a sustainable approach. In 2017, I had my biggest garden ever and was once again photographed for the local paper. Today I have 5 pineapple guavas, 4 olive trees, 2 fig trees, a loquat, mandarin, calamandin, and kefir lime, and 2 large passion fruit vines. Goji berries, blueberries, boysenberry, and Cape gooseberry, sugar cane, as well as lemon verbena and lemongrass are just a few of my perennials. Adding wood chips to my garden 2 years ago has changed my whole approach. I spend a lot less effort and time digging, I save money and time on watering, and weeds rarely make an appearance. Growing more perennials has left less space and available sunlight for annuals, and this year I've tipped the scales more towards year-round plants. I'd grow 5 times as many plants as I have if I only had the space. The jungle ebbs and flows with the season when there's less light in winter, but in spring and summer, the front yard these days is packed. Today the pineapple guavas have crowded out everything I have planted underneath, but they are stunning when covered with their sweet edible blooms as they are now, and scrumptious when they mature in the fall.
Okay, first bucket full. Go ahead, Eric.
Looking back through literally tens of thousands of clips and photos, I amaze even myself at what I've managed to accomplish. I hope it is inspiring to you. Thanks so much for watching this channel, liking my videos, and especially sharing them with friends. Please consider becoming a patron of this channel and look in the description below for other ways to support this channel. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video. And if you enjoyed this one, why not try these?